is transforming our world. It's lowering operational expenses, increasing efficiencies for businesses, and helping to solve a variety of complex problems. And it's all happening on top of technology platforms developed by Intel. We've put our full might into building radically new processing, interconnect, and software technologies, all so we can better serve the increasing demands of AI applications. Because at Intel, we push possible forward.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's virtual race to .conf, brought to you by our friends at Intel. And I am excited to welcome Rose Schooler to the broadcast. She's the Corporate Vice President of Data Center Sales at Intel. Rose, welcome to the virtual race to .conf.
Thank you so much, Corey, and thank you for having me. I'm really, really excited to be part of your virtual race towards .conf. And I hear last year you actually had a real road trip to Vegas to .conf. How awesome is that? But I just love how you've adapted the format to deal with the virtual world that we live in right now.
Oh, it's a wild time, but we are excited. It's a fun race. We got some great racing action today. But I'm curious from your perspective, tell me a little bit about why Intel is excited to be part of this race.
Well, obviously, we're a really big fan of Splunk. We're both a customer, interestingly enough, and a partner. And we have fantastic collaboration to help customers really modernize and digitally transform their businesses. These days that there's so many companies that really want to deliver on the AI and machine learning vision and have solutions to support that vision for their big data challenges. And when we work collectively and collaboratively with Splunk, we are able to be a consumer of that technology and then turn those experiences and those solutions to our joint customers so they have more performant and cost-effective solutions.
Absolutely. Well, I understand you guys have a pretty strong partnership, and you kind of outlined it there. Do me a little favor. Tell me a little bit about the partnership, how it got started, and what you're doing together.
I would love to. So it really all started with our Intel InfoSec team. So our cyber intelligence platform ingests, get this, 12 terabytes of data per day. Wow. Isn't that crazy? That's insane. 22 billion security events per day.
Wow.
So that's a big problem statement to start with, and which leads to a great opportunity. And with all that data, we knew we needed to make sure that our platform was optimized for Splunk, running on Intel's latest and greatest technologies. So like I said, we implemented the solution in our InfoSec team. We shared the work with our customers to help them achieve the best Splunk experience on Intel. And then we made sure that they understood the Splunk customer requirements, worked through the optimizations through our collective engineering efforts. So I got to give a huge shout out to the Splunk engineers, right? They worked absolutely hand in hand with our engineers to really achieve that optimization so our collective end customers would get the real world results that they were hoping to achieve on the collective platform.
That's brilliant. Well, as you start to look forward, we got the world is getting closer back to normal, hopefully, and we've got some great innovation and things happening that are going to be announced at .conf. But I'm curious from your perspective, what's next for the Intel and Splunk partnership?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously we're going to start bring these solutions together, and we got a couple more that we're teeing up. You'll hear from both of us, Intel and Splunk at .conf, on how we're continuing to work on modernizing the data center. And in one instance, it's for a tier 1 US bank. So I want y'all to look for the session called Be the MVP of Your Splunk Modernization Project. So that's the first one. So that'll be a cool session. So we'd love everybody to join us for that session. And then we're working on IoT together, and we're bringing the best of our technologies together on an AI visual solution for situational monitoring, which is awesome for kind of the new pandemic world and then the post-pandemic economy that we live in. And then we're going to be enabling Splunk for the first time ever, and this is so awesome, to analyze visual data. So 2 things. 1, check out that class and we'll see what we're doing with the tier 1 US bank. And then again, analyzing visual data in an IoT implementation. Awesome stuff.
Oh, that is so exciting. Well, definitely check out those sessions. But right now, Rose, it is time for the fun to begin. I'd like to say again, I love it. This is great. I just want to say, a huge thank you to the Intel team for partnering and sponsoring the Big Data Beards virtual race to .conf. And now it is your turn to do the honors. Rose, would you kick us off here?
Would love to. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, start your engines.
Well, we are excited to be in beautiful Australia, down under at Bathurst, just outside of Sydney. And congrats to Tomic, the Shadow Esports driver for McLaren, driving with us today, taking the pole position. But I tell you what, Kyle, this is pretty exciting. I think this is the first time all 4 of the Big Data Beard team has qualified in the top 10. How are you feeling about your chances today?
I'm feeling really good. You know, it is my home track today, so I feel like I have a little bit of an advantage there, but I don't want to get too cocky because this is going to be quite a challenging race today for all of us.
Absolutely. Now things are just a little bit different down under. Kyle, this track, home to V8 supercar racing. I don't know. Do you have any insight on when I say it's different? What makes Australian racing different than maybe what folks are used to around the world?
Oh, it's just always a good time down under. This is absolutely the premier track to come to in Australia, to the point where friends of mine here in Sydney talk about how they'll spend the weekend out there. One interesting anecdote that we did here was they only allow 1 case of beer out there. So if you're a dedicated race fan and on a budget, you tend to go out a couple days beforehand and actually bury your extra booze to then enjoy your weekend.
Oh, that's commitment to a good time at the racetrack. Well, here we see Tomic bunching up the crowd as we start to take off here at Bathurst, also known as Mount Panorama racetrack. Now, this is, like we said, home of the V8 supercar, so a big, powerful car. These McLarens and BMW GT3 cars should be right at home on the track. Kyle, when you think about this race, what do you think the keys to winning today's race are going to be?
It's going to be fast going and then hard braking when you're not in the mountain. When you are going up the mountain and down the mountain, it's the exact opposite. It's going to be finessing. So these drivers are going to have to be using both hard power, hard braking, and finessing as well. And I think the key to that is understanding when to properly apply each of those as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you see we're coming up the mountain here, and you can see massive elevation change in this course. It makes it really an anomaly in the racing world to have quite so much elevation. Feels like a mountain race, we call it. And yeah, it's a mix of some crazy long straightaways. The other thing I think to be key here is, you know, we have cars bump walls from time to time. And, you know, if you're on a short track that you can get to the pits, you know, real easily, or if you have a track that doesn't have, you know, massive straightaways, you got a little bit of steering damage. Not too big of a deal, but here, man, if you have damage, oh, and look here, we've got up at the top of the hill, that's near the S's at the beginning, got a little damage. Kyle, I hate to see you go down like that. That's tough.
I think the pressure just got to me there. You know, it's a little cocky on the first lap, and you can see the benefits of that happening to me.
Absolutely. Well, as we come down through the S's, this is the downhill side of the roller coaster. And as I said, you know, not doing damage up here in the mountain is going to be key to winning, because it is a long tow. Even if you can do the fast recovery, it's a long way down there. And here you can see Tomic coming up the back straightaway. But I tell you what, today's race, we are super excited to have the team at Intel sponsoring, as we talked about earlier on. And we're going to go check in now with Merritt Stetson to hear more about what Intel's doing with the team at Splunk.
All right, thanks, Corey. I'm here with Merritt Stetson, who is a technical specialist focused on application performance with Intel. Merritt, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Brett. How you doing today?
Hey, doing very well. It's a great race, you know, very competitive, really excited. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, there's been so much going on with us and Splunk and some of the other partners that I haven't had a moment to rest since the race. So it's been quite good.
Yeah, busy's good though, right? And we definitely want to get into hearing about all the interesting things Intel and Splunk are doing together. But first, I want to take a little bit of a step back, and I want to start by asking, what is Intel's strategy as it relates to data analytics in general? And then where does Splunk fit into that data analytics strategy?
So first of all, Intel has been focused very heavily on understanding what is it the customer wants to achieve from the data. Because very often, it really comes down to understanding what their objectives are. So we work through that. But then Intel really looks at it from a holistic perspective, because it's no longer just simply about the actual processing of the data. It's moving the data, it's storing the data, and it's processing the data. And then ultimately you have to be able to visualize it. So looking at it in this holistic way, that's why it's been fun with us to work with Splunk, because not only does it take in and do all of those things with data, move it around, ingest it, store it, it then processes it, but then it has to be searchable. So that's where value really gets created at that point. So we look at that entire platform, and that's where we've been focused.
Okay, so obviously Splunk does all of that, and it's an integral part of the data analytics strategy for a lot of organizations out there. Talk a little bit about the partnership between Intel and Splunk. Where did that come about, and kind of what's the focus of the partnership?
So a little over 2 years ago, I was working with one of our SI partners, and they came to me personally and said, hey, look, we want to do a lot more with Splunk, and they weren't generating a lot of money just from selling hardware, because that's an industry standard type platform. They really wanted to look at how they could have an architecture that was easy to implement for them, and then they would gain revenue through implementation and configuration. So that started us working with the Splunk team. And then I connected with our own internal team that's using Splunk on that side, because Intel is a large consumer of the Splunk platform as well. So that was about 2 years ago, and we just continued to start working on that. We were connected with the engineering team. Shout out to Francisco Casas, Skip Bacon, and Ryan Faircloth. Really a strong partnership where their engineering team and our engineering team worked closely, and I'm part of that. I work on the sales side, so I'm an overlay. So I support our sales account executives and the sales engineers. So when they want to get something deeper, like going into an application like Splunk, they would pull me in. So I've been that bridge between where we are with our customers and where we are with the technical people. And we had this, and we still have it, a weekly meeting with the Splunk engineering team. So it's been very in-depth, and we've actually built, used, consumed everything that we've tested.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a really strong technology alliances partnership.
Yes, I would say that. And actually it has also become more than just a partnership, because through this we've actually become closer, just not only as human beings, but as people working together. So I'm also on 2 other calls with OEMs, where now we've expanded this to where we're on a Splunk hardware OEM and Intel call that really is now trying to understand what's going on out there and help the customer get what they're looking for.
Oh, that's very cool. And obviously Splunk is one of those applications that's, it kind of fits into a couple different categories when we talk about infrastructure or resource consumption. It's a very data-centric workload, but it's also a very compute-centric workload. And then when you factor in the nature of its evolution and growth in organizations' data centers, there's a lot of challenges that organizations face in managing growth. So how is Intel working with Splunk, and kind of what's Intel doing to help organizations get the most out of their Splunk environment while helping them seamlessly and effectively grow both their storage and their compute?
So as I said, we've been working together with Splunk now for 2 years. So we sat down with this, worked with the engineering team from Splunk. We ran testing tools. We understood what your KPIs, because the engineering team said, these are the KPIs that matter to our customer. Because we've all read those, briefs that are customized and nobody ever can do it. But in this case, we really wanted to approach it from, let's do this as real to real life as we possibly could. So we looked at the KPIs that your engineering team said, these are the ones that matter most to our customer. And then we focused on that. And then we started finding out that really the bottlenecks weren't around the CPU. They were heavily around storage, because you've got to take and put that storage down there. The search heads are really write intensive, because they have to take and go out there and get that data. They write it for that search. It has to go through a compress, decompress. So looking at what do we do to speed up those processes. So once we understood the internals of that, we focused on our side of the puzzle to say, okay, now that we know how Splunk works, let's take and tune the hardware, find the right hardware matches that work with that. So the customer benefit is that we can eliminate physical machines from their infrastructure, which you might say, well, that's not a good thing. However, it is, because while you might reduce the number of physical machines, the value of the processing capability and storage capabilities of those physical servers increases. And that's where it's really interesting. So the customer benefits because they're paying less maintenance, less rack space, less ports. They're able to do that. Splunk is not impacted because of your licensing agreements. And for Intel, since we have a higher total content in that box, we win as well, as does our hardware OEMs. So it was a great way to look at how do we make this work really well and focus on what matters. And ultimately, when we focused on the customer and we went through the process, it actually was beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, and now you're talking things like more ingestion per an indexer, or being able to conduct more concurrent searches, like stuff in that realm?
Absolutely. That's exactly, you hit nail right on the head.
I mean, I think that's a really important part too, right? Because when we think about customers and some of the challenges of managing growth, it's not just number of indexers, but it's number of racks that they can, support for Splunk. So being more efficient in how you grow and scale Splunk becomes extremely important.
Yeah, and I think and power's another one. So we've got a couple of ours that are looking at IoT and being able to process that, but they're power constrained. So power is a big factor in this equation as well. So eliminating, say 5 or 10% of what you would have had to buy, even though you make each one of those servers more valuable. So the server cost will go up, but the number of servers goes down. So at the end of the day, you save on all those operational costs. So it changes the TCO.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So where can the audience go to learn more about what the technologies are, what the these indexers look like? What's the next step for anyone who's interested in exploring this option for deploying Splunk?
Well, we have a lot of great information both on Splunk's site, because we did a joint reference configuration with Splunk that was signed off by both companies, where we went through and looked at it and said, let's make sure this is right so that it looks good. So you can go to your site and find the Intel reference configuration, or you can come to Intel's site and just do a regular Google search and type in there saying Splunk Intel reference configuration or architecture, however you want to phrase it. So that information will be very easily accessible.
Oh, perfect. Well, Merritt, it's been great chatting with you about the really exciting things Intel is doing in partnership with Splunk to help organizations that are really challenged by growth and scale. Really appreciate it. Corey, we're going to send it back to you now to check in on the race.
Well, thanks, Brett. It looks like the story of the race behind you guys there while you were talking was basically a little bit of shucking and jiving, but it ended up not netting a whole lot of change. We had Westy spinning out, losing some positions. I was able to gain a few marks on it, but then I ended up bumping into the wall at the top of the track, losing all those positions I gained, and that is just a bummer.
Yeah, Corey, that was not good for you. I think it might benefit you to listen to one of your key tenets of the races going forward.
Absolutely. Well, we got a good race going on here between, looks like that Signal FX car and Brett just going right up the mountain. Let's go check in and see what the data says about that little race.
Hey, just wanted to jump into the data real quick as we saw Brett and Splunk App Dev climb up and down Mount Panorama. It truly was fascinating to see how close they were together, as well as from a data standpoint, how similar they were. I went ahead and pulled up the speed metric, and I labeled out McLaren lap 3 as the fastest lap so far. And what you can really see is just how close these two were in the middle of that lap as they were going up and down Mount Panorama. Let's take a look at the brakes and just see how close those were as well. Alright, and with this visualization, you can actually see that going up there was minimal braking, but coming down the mountain, you can see where the McLaren car was braking quite a bit less than Brett's BMW. And I think this has a bit to do with the make of the car, more so than the driving style, because we saw this similarly with another BMW earlier in the series. But we really think that that's a key area where Brett lost some time on that lap as well, where the Splunk App Dev car was able to pull ahead from them. Anyways, we'll send it back to you on the track.
Well, thanks, Kyle. It's great to get that insight as to what's going on in the race and see those absolutely beautiful dashboards powered by Splunk. And I tell you what, this track, as we've seen so far, quite an interesting one. Mix of some big, long straightaways, big elevation change. Kyle, from your perspective, what do you think makes this Mount Panorama Bathurst circuit so unique?
I think it's just the giant hill in the middle, because what we have here is actually a 6.2K or right around 3.8 miles for the American track. But within that, there's 23 turns. Now, when you evenly space those out, it's not a big deal. But what we realized is that between 2 turn and 19 is the mountain. And that is where you're probably going to get into some trouble if you are going to have some issues here on the track. And the problem with that is that the pit building is actually in between turn 23 and 1. So anywhere you end up on the mountain, you either have to go up and down it and go through multitude of turns before you can get back to pit road to get your car fixed. So any error going up and down this mountain can wreak huge loss for your team, just getting yourself back to the pits as well. So it's just one key focus of being a little bit safer going up and down this hill and really focusing on the finesse on that portion of the track.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we see Tomic in the McLaren car continue to build a gap, and it's a good thing he had a little off-track incident there. And you actually saw him coming up that mountain straight. That straightaway is super long and actually has a big hill in it that prior to modern cars and their great aerodynamics, those cars used to go airborne right over there. So it's quite a story. Here we see some of the back markers getting into the little traffic, causing some trouble for the back of the pack. And I want to make sure that we call out that we do have a great podcast today with the team from Intel joining us to talk about how Intel is using Splunk internally for their security operations in a really unique and holistic way, but also how Splunk is actually being partners with Intel and how Intel is helping those organizations deploying Splunk at scale to run it on Intel's latest and greatest hardware, optimizing the infrastructure to make sure that it performs and runs efficiently. So definitely tune into the Big Data Beard podcast on your favorite podcast app. All you got to do is look up and search Big Data Beard on your favorite app. And here again, we see the McLaren 1 car driven by Dan McEwen having a little trouble keeping it straight. But let's go check in with Intel for our second interview.
Thanks, Corey. Hey, we're now joined by Juan Fernandez, who is a technical solution specialist with Intel. Juan, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Pleasure to be here and pleasure to be part of the production.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I got to say, I really like that shirt. It's really spiffy there.
San Luis Obispo Rugby.
I like it. Really cool. Hey, so, earlier in the broadcast, we had Merritt on, and he was talking about how customers are growing their Splunk environment and how Intel is working with Splunk to, help push the thresholds of ingestion or how you can be more efficient with your Splunk resources. And, obviously Intel has a very wide portfolio. Can you talk about some of those technologies that Intel has or that they're leveraging to help enable this?
Sure. Of course, everyone's familiar with Intel CPUs, right? Intel CPUs drive the internet, or the vast majority of the internet. So everyone's familiar there, but NVMe and our NAND portfolio and our Optane portfolio are what really make a difference in improving Splunk performance. We found that switching from SAS-based SSDs to NVMe SSDs in some of our testing gave us 40% better CPU efficiency. So just removing that SAS data gave us very good performance and CPU efficiency, which allowed us to do scaling up of Splunk on the systems we tested.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when we talk about scaling up, we're talking about ingestion, and generally speaking, Splunk says somewhere in the neighborhood of like maybe 300 gigs per index per day. So we're looking at this bringing in terabytes of ingestion per indexer per day. Is that an accurate statement right there?
I think we hit like 10 terabytes per the testing that we did.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the testing was like 3 or 4 indexers that were clustered, and you were able to actually bring in that 10 terabyte of ingestion, which is just very crazy when we think about what organizations in production are using, how many indexers that they're using to get to 10 terabytes of ingestion.
Right. That's the big thing, is that by using fewer nodes, but making them more capable, we were able to save significant power, rack space, fewer systems overall, and NVMe was a big part of that.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I think this dovetails into my next question for you, which is, what are some of the challenges that you see customers that you chat with face with, managing and growing their Splunk deployments?
Well, server sprawl is everyone's primary concern. I've had the opportunity to work with some of the largest social media companies and cloud scale providers, and they're all trying to condense their footprints rather than adding a new physical server. If you think about the original days of virtualization, right? The whole idea behind virtualization was to condense the number of applications running on independent servers. And basically we're seeing kind of a second generation of that same concept of being able to take what was a dedicated physical server and scale up using Kubernetes and using containers, and more efficient as networking and CPU. So the biggest thing that we're really trying to help solve for is minimizing the server sprawl within a data center and getting more efficiencies out of those servers in those systems.
Yeah, and I think that's an extremely important hurdle for a lot of organizations that, the Splunk users want to grow and they need more performance, but obviously the infrastructure team has to be able to have the allocated space to do that. So more efficient resources, more efficient components allows, a win-win for both sides of the team, right? And I think that's definitely one of the trends. What are some of the trends outside of kind of just, managing growth that you're seeing Splunk customers kind of gravitate to in 2020?
Definitely adding more forwarders and more information into their Splunk environments. There's a kind of an adoption of more cloudities and bringing in more information to derive better business assets and information from all of the remote devices that are out there that have the ability to forward all of that information and derive that business intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about data to everything platform, with data to everything, that means you can send everything to Splunk, and that's, adding more forwarders, adding more data sources, growing that environment.
Right, exactly. But then being able to have the performance to do search on that and be able to have, especially when you talk about Splunk ES, no skip searches. That was one of the key parameters in the POC that we did, was making sure that we were under I believe it was all searches under 12 milliseconds and no skip searches was the requirement at that same ingest rate that we were talking about. That was, I think we exceeded the customer's goal of ingest rate by 10x number using the combination of Xeon scalable processors and NVMe SSDs.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, right? It's not just about ingestion. That's part of the battle, but really the important thing is the search and making sure that in production you're still getting those efficient searches and being able to complete those searches in the proper amount of time while also ingesting more data. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's like the old joke. It doesn't matter how well you do your backup. What matters is your restore, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been in the industry for a while.
Yeah. Now, conf is just a couple days away. So, what are you most excited about for this year's virtual user conference?
Well, I'm very excited for the fans to see the Intel car on the track. Most of the time it was wheels down and was at least competitive for the first couple of laps around the track. Also, very excited for customers to testing that we've done. We've had to keep a lot of the final numbers under wraps for our POC, just for the customer's privacy reasons, but also we wanted to actually have something and a venue to really present the POC findings. And so I think it'll be an exciting time. I think if I heard correctly, there are 30,000 people signed up for the Splunk Virtual Conf, something like that, a large number. So hopefully there'll be something there for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all very exciting things that I'm looking forward to as well. Well, Juan, it's been great chatting with you and really diving into the weeds about what Intel is doing, kind of how it works, and what's under the covers with these new indexers and this new build and reference architecture with Splunk. So thank you so much for your time today. And Corey, we're going to send it back to you for the conclusion of the race.
Well, thanks, Brett. Great to hear from the team at Intel. And Kyle, looks like the pack has really settled down. Looks like there's not a lot of changes happening while Brett and Juan were having their conversation. Pretty stable. But I see here you've you had some trouble early in the race. It looks like you've kind of stabilized here in the middle of the pack. What's your strategy at this point in the race?
Yeah, I'm trying to stay on the lead lap here because while we are focused on position here, this is a point series. So you do want to make sure that you don't lose a lap, as then the leaders can gain a point ahead of you. But you also need to find that fine line of also, not battling them out too bad and ripping them into a wall. Another thing I've noticed as well is that trying to pass and battle it out super hard going up and down that mountain is just a bad idea. Yeah. So if you're going to make a position change, do it while you're outside the mountain. And you can see that you can really get some hard straightaways going to get around your competition there.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks like a few of these cars have got a little bit of damage, and that damage, like I said early in the race, is super challenging whenever you get to these long straightaways. You can see here 2 cars that have clearly bounced off a couple of walls and are just no good for the wear. But hey, if you want to get in on the racing action, I do want to make sure you know that we're actually, while you're watching these broadcasts leading up to .conf, during .conf, we're going to be hosting the Beat the Beards Championship Racing Series, and that's happening October 20th and 21st are the 2 play-in races. And the play-in races are basically capped at 60 people per race, and the top 10 finishers in each of those will move on to the championship October 22nd. So make sure you head over to bigdatabeard.com/VR2C to check out the details on the Beat the Beards race. And we invite you to bring your iRacing skills and see if you can come join us. We're going to be racing at Indy, Silverstone, and the Las Vegas road course. But I'll tell you what, Brett, Kyle, let's go check in on a little bit of the tech behind today's race.
Welcome to today's tech overview, where we take a behind-the-scenes look at the technology that makes today's virtual Race to Conf possible. Today we're going to take a look at the health kit data, which is the data that is streaming off of our wearables, like our Apple Watches or Android watches, and we're able to take a look at the heart rate and various other health implications that we've had from racing. A special thanks to our sponsor Intel. Let's dive right in. If you're familiar with our road trip from last year, you know how much we loved using the Health Post app, and now we're going to take a look at it at an intimate detail. To get started with the Health Post app, you're actually going to have to dive right back into the HTTP event collector and go ahead and pull that token that we created from earlier and send that right over to your Apple device. Today we're going to talk about using it with my iPhone. So from here, we'll dive right into the Health Post app, and then from there we'll configure it by placing my name as well as the Splunk URL and that HTTP event collector token that we pulled from earlier. You can also set aside an S3 bucket name if you want to store it in something like that. But for now, we're just going to worry about it from Splunk. Now, to take a look at what else we have in here as well, we have a source type dictionary where we can see what exactly source types are getting sent into Splunk to make it a bit easier for us to search. We also have the ability to backfill our data, so we can actually send data back from when we started collecting it via Apple, not when we were sending the data into Splunk. We also have a handy dandy log where we can see what's happening within the app to make sure that we're sending healthy data. But let's dive back into main. As you can see, it will automatically pull in the numbers in the job queue and send data from there. So let's go ahead and push send missing data and see what happens. As you can see, it did a successful upload, successfully sent data, and now let's dive right back into Splunk and see what that looks like. So here we are within the Splunk screen. I created an index called Health Kit, and from here I created a 5-minute window where we're pulling in data as well. We're just going to do a quick refresh of that as I think the search is timed out, and let's see what data we get pulled in. Awesome. And what's great about this is that convenient JSON payload that we discussed earlier. It makes it really quick and easy to search all the data within Splunk and provide searches back in a much quicker aspect. From here, you can also see our interesting fields. One thing that I found particularly fun was seeing our stand as well as our total stand seconds to make sure that we're getting up and moving around within this COVID environment. You can also see my daily caloric intake as well as my exercise that we would run during the race. So in order to keep a full heart rate during the race, we would put the watches into exercise mode to then see and ensure that we were receiving second by second heart rate. And from there, we'll dive into a little bit of the fun around some wrecks and crashes and what that does with the heart rate as well. But we'll take a look at that later. For now, we're going to send it back to the team on the track. Special thanks to our sponsor, Intel. Thanks again.
Well, thanks, Kyle. That is pretty cool to see the ways that we're able to pull data not only from iRacing, but from so many cool sources to really get some insight as to the human side of this. And here we see that McLaren car, Tomic, just navigating around some of that back marker traffic. We talk about that lap traffic can really slow you down, but he does a great job getting on the brakes and avoiding that Intel car during a spin. And here you can see that he's really built himself a nice 30-plus second gap. And as long as he can continue to run consistent laps, it's looking pretty good for him. And the race really right now looks like the really only close race looks like for 4th and 5th is really the race to watch for anybody in the top 5 right now. But Kyle, I'm curious, we've had this is race number 9. We're 9 races in. How are you feeling after literally slugging it out for 9 straight days of practice, qualifying, racing? How are you holding up physically?
Oh, I'm absolutely exhausted. With the timings of a lot of these, it's an early morning for me, which is totally cool. But it's just shaking off the dust of the waking up, getting some coffee in you, and getting pumped to do some racing. I will say I'm happy with the outcome that we've had. I think it's awesome to have all these different skills and backgrounds and familiarity with racing, and to see everybody come together and put together a pretty fun circuit is really exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here you can see me completely forgetting how to use the brakes coming down that straightaway, headed into the pit straight. And you know what? That's challenging. I was trying to track down Niall in that beautiful Aero McLaren to see if I could gain that 4th position, but I think that's going to put me pretty far back. Hard to get over that. I'll tell you what, I'm interested in I would actually be interested in driving my car out there. I've got one of those Aussie V8 supercars at home. I wish I could drive that thing out there.
I don't think it would perform super well, though, as you have the steering wheel on the wrong side of the car here, so it might have some left-leaning bias. I'm not sure. I am seeing quite a bit of action on the track, though. I'm wondering if that has to do a bit, with the weightless, losing the weight in the gas, as well as maybe some tire wear, some track wear as well. That's something we'll have to dive into our Splunk dashboard and see what we can come up with.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, just right there, we saw McLaren coming around the top of the hill at the top of the mountain. He literally is driving that car on the razor's edge. It looks like it's sliding around the track. And honestly, folks, that's what fast looks like. It looks like it's just barely under control. Like you are at a razor's edge of making a slight mistake, and that car could go spinning off the track. And that's some real skill we're seeing that Tomic and the McLaren Shadow Esports team put on here for us today. Now, we're coming up pretty close to a checkered flag coming out. Looks like that McLaren 2 car driven by Tomic is going to do pretty well today. And Splunk ES, that's going to be pretty cool to see Splunk getting another podium finish. That's actually driven by our buddy. Let's see, that's Simon Yep. Simon Yep, a seasoned professional in iRacing. So glad to see him having some success out here. All right, checkered flag. The white checkered flag is going to come around this time for the McLaren team. And congrats to Tomic for a position 1 finish today. Folks, we've enjoyed having you on the race, and I want to make sure that you all come back tomorrow for the final race of the Big Data Beard virtual race to .conf. We're going back across the pond to US to what would have been the home of .conf in Las Vegas at Las Vegas Motor Speedway for a race there to wrap things up. And definitely tune in because we've got a tight race in the points battle for those top 3 positions, and tomorrow's race absolutely matters.
Yeah, and that track is an absolute blast to drive and watch as well, because the setup that we have is part street track as well as part oval. So if you want to see these cars just rip and race in an oval, hit out the top speeds, and then take a hard left and dive right into street racing, that is an absolute fun time to be a part of.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be there. And folks, also stay tuned right after on whatever platform you're watching. We're going to be streaming the award ceremony announcing the winners of the Big Data Beards virtual race to .conf. Well, as we've done with every race, it's time to go to our resident Splunk Trust member, Tom West, to get a little bit of insight into the data as to what happened in the race and why he thinks it went the way it did, powered by Splunk Insights. Let's check in now with Tom West.
Hi everybody, welcome to another post-race data analysis, this time at Bathurst. Now, finishing in the podium is a great feeling, but sometimes it can be very stressful, especially when driving a car that you've slammed into the wall on one of the first laps. So we wanted to have a look back at the health data again to see how stressful that actually was, and we got some stress data this time. We got heart rate and we got stress rate for myself. First of all, I would like to say, if we look further up on our dashboard, we can see that Kyle is a lot fitter than I am, or at least he's in better shape. His heart rate throughout most of the race was differing between 180, whereas mine was averaging at around 100. So big up to Kyle on that one. Now, if we have a look at my own data, as we would expect, stress is high at the top. At the start, heart rate is high at the top, and as we get towards the midpoint of the race, we're driving a car that's not at its best, but we're getting comfortable. Our heart rate's getting down, our stress is getting down. We're in the race. We're doing what we need to do, and then about 2/3 of the way through, everything spikes, everything surges, and that happens to coincide with when the Arrow car had caught up with me and was battling for position. Really unfortunate for him that he got taken out towards the back end of the race, because that was promising to be quite a decent battle. But it's very, very interesting to have a look at the data and see just when you are competing for positions, when you're in that competitive mode, stress kicks up, heart rate kicks up, and to see that on a dashboard again is quite interesting and quite thought-provoking. Anyway, that was the story that we found. Is there a better story? Is there something that you have found that you think is more worthwhile telling? Please let us know. Thanks as always to our race sponsor today, Intel, and back to you at the studio.
Well, thanks, Tom West. Congrats, Tom, for position 3. That's great to hear your insights, but also great to see you get a podium finish. And congratulations to Tomic from the McLaren team, taking home the win today with really quality racing on what is an exciting and interesting track. And Simon, congratulations on a second place finish, representing the Splunk team well. And folks, I want to make sure you tune in again tomorrow for the race at Las Vegas. But before we go, let's go check in with our race podium winners. Well, thanks, team, for the awesome broadcast. I'm here now with the winners, position 1 through 3. I want to congratulate Tomic, regular podium finisher in position 1. Simon, you're just like a staple here in position 2. And Tom West, congratulations on the third place finish. Tomic, I want to start with you. What was the most exciting and or challenging part of the race today for a person with your skills? I know you're out there just working, you know how to do this pretty well, but was there any part of this race or course you found challenging?
I mean, as I said, the first time I drove the track was like an hour before the race, so of course it was very challenging. The practice session before the race, it was all about learning the track really. But during the actual race, I felt quite confident. I got used to the track and the walls being very close quite quickly. But yeah, as always, it's been dealing with the traffic. One time, I think I was lapping one of the guys and I had a bit of a collision, so that meant I had to pit and quickly repair the car. But yeah, other than that, it's just staying out of the walls and managing the traffic nicely, which has always been the case throughout these races, because of course I do reach quite a bit of lap traffic, and dealing with them as efficiently and as safely as possible is the key to keeping the lead, because one moment of being too impatient and you might end up in a wall, suspension damage, and race is over.
Absolutely. Simon, how about you? What was the most challenging part of today's track for you?
I would say I would agree that just trying to get through traffic in that upper section where there's just really one lane, it's quite interesting to see people with busted steering, and they got no choice but to maybe hit you.
Yeah. Now, Tom West, Tomic mentioned earlier that there are some walls on this track that are a little bit less than we would say forgiving. How did those walls affect your race today?
Immensely. I think downhill, not even before the end of the first lap, I
just tapped one of the walls on the right side slightly, and the rest of the race is me driving at 11 o'clock. And then and then halfway through, just as I'm being caught by fourth place, I decided that I was going to bin it on the left as well. So the amount of travel between left and right was just crazy, and it meant it slowed down speed through the corners, but it was good enough just to carry on.
Yeah, and I thought this track was pretty unique as well. You know, it had the ups and downs of Laguna Seca, but then also the twists and turns of Tsukuba. Tomic, particularly for you, what was one part of the track that you felt extremely comfortable and confident in, that you had quite a bit of fun in?
I think just generally the mountain part where you are very close to the wall, so you have to send it all the time. I'm a big fan. My favorite track out there is Monaco, so this track was of course going to be fun to me. As I said, I really love challenging tracks. The very little room for mistake. I just love the tension and the excitement every time you go through those corners. So yeah, the mountain section was just fantastic. And once I nailed it on the few fast laps I managed to do, so satisfying. So yeah, definitely there.
Yeah, awesome. Simon, man, you crushed your lap times. Where within the track did you feel like you were making up a lot of your time?
Geez, I put in a little bit of practice, and probably the biggest spot that you can make the difference is that first uphill. You can carry so much speed, and it's trying not to hit traffic there. And then through the top section, whoever you get caught behind, like, you're either passing them or you're getting stuck. So yeah, that front section is super key.
Yeah. How about you, Westy?
I think that the bit right at the top, the sweeping lefts over the crests, I learned from my mistakes at Laguna and would find myself in practice going out quite a lot. So keeping that a little bit slow, but then slammed it going downhill. And there's some of the downhill bends I just love, in terms of you shouldn't be able to go around the corner fast. But what was interesting was during the race, Simon would be pulling away from me going uphill, and as we were going downhill and certainly to around the pits, his car would suddenly become a lot bigger. Then we go to the uphill, and it was see you later. So it was fun.
So Simon clearly knew where he was fast. That's awesome.
Yes.
I will say I have a dream of driving a proper V8, an Aussie V8 supercar on that track, because I feel like even if you bend it into the walls, those are some big beefy cars. Like, they could probably survive a little bit of the pounding. So it'd be super fun. Well, I'll tell you what, amazing race, gentlemen. I do want to say that, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world, and we're lucky enough to be able to be doing something fun like this. I'm curious if there's anybody from each of you who've won that you think you're like exceptionally thankful for. We've talked a lot about ourselves, a lot about our own races. Is there anybody that you're just glad is out there working while they're while trying to take care of humanity in a time like this? Tomic, I'll start with you. Anybody you're super thankful for?
I mean, the whole healthcare. I live here in Poland, and I think the job they're doing is super important in those days. And yeah, I think any country, anyone should be thankful to all the healthcare out there. So definitely them, yes.
Excellent. Simon, how about you? Anybody you're thankful for, maybe?
Yeah, I would agree that these first responders, they're definitely taking a lot of risk, and it's interesting to see the dynamics of how people agree with protecting themselves or protecting others. So it's a huge thanks to those first responders.
Yeah, and Tom, you've had some personal interaction, I know, with some of the teams supporting supporting the populace there in the UK. What's your thankfulness?
So 100% towards the healthcare workers around the world, really. But obviously, we've gone and devoted a significant area of our car to making sure that we give a massive thanks to the NHS in the UK for all the amazing work they do. But not just the NHS, but all the key workers, the police, the fire service, all those other amazing support workers, supermarket and grocery store staff, delivery drivers, everyone. It's such a challenging time, and just a massive thank you to me for everyone out there that's doing their bit.
Absolutely. Well, we are thankful that you're tuning in to join us for the virtual Race to Conf. We're looking forward to having you join us at the world's first virtual.conf, and we're excited. We're just days away, and we invite you to come join us on some of the activities that we're going to have there. Make sure you tune in to to the session that Kyle and I are going to do, where we break down the ways that we worked with Tom West and Brett and the Big Data Beard team to build this data collection platform on top of iRacing. Have some great stories for you. Thanks so much for tuning in to this series or this race in the virtual Race to Conf series, and we'll see you tomorrow in Las Vegas for the final race.
Think you have what it takes to beat the Beards on iRacing?
You probably do. We're not that good.
Sign up at bigdatabeard.com/VR2C.
We're probably just going to run you into the wall.